Hi, I'm Mitch Shoemaker, and today is day 89 of my doing 100 days of YouTube videos and focusing on my writing. So, yay for day 89. I have 11 days left to go. And I feel like the past 100 days, it started out really well the first like 30 or 40 days, I think. But I think I've progressively gone downhill as I've been stressed out or freaking out about things, and so not doing as well as I would have liked, but still doing, which I'm grateful for. I'm very grateful that I'm still doing. I'm very grateful I've made it to day 89 and I have not given up. And although I have spent the last 89 days not avoiding writing in my journal the entire time, but avoiding using journal writing as counting for my writing. And today I just said, I don't care. I need to write in my journal, and I'm so tired. I am counting that for my writing today. So I wrote in my journal tonight, and I'm very grateful for that. And I wrote a lot of analogies, some of which I may try to explain and or share. I went to dinner with a friend of mine, my 12-step friend. I think that's what I call her. I don't know. I get all confused with all the different friends that I've mentioned on here and what I call them. But anyway, I went to dinner with my friend tonight, and we were talking about things. And we had a few conversations. And so it was nice and helpful because we have similar backgrounds, not the same, but we also have a lot of the same responses and reactions to things. And it's kind of nice, helpful to me, because I tell her, I'm like, I just watch her life because I'm like, I can see the parallels in my own life. And so I'm trying not to repeat the same patterns, but I also can see the same patterns. I can see the patterns more clearly in her life and then realize that I'm repeating the same patterns. Not quite the same way, but I have the same patterns where I do really good with my journaling, with my writing, with all of those things, and I feel good and happy, and then I get close to finishing something, accomplishing something happens in my life, and that default survival setting or shutdown mode, whatever it is, kicks in, and all of a sudden I'm back to struggling, and I can't seem to get out of bed, and I can't seem to do all the things that I want to be doing, and I don't seem to understand. And we were talking a little bit about that tonight, and she was talking about some of it being like subconscious, and we don't realize why it is we're doing those things until those subconscious thoughts or reactions come to the surface. And once they come to our conscious minds, then we can figure out what to do with them, how to process them, and how to let them go. So, and I was telling her, like my counselor said about freeze states and how it takes longer to process those, and I have a lot of those. I have a lot of confusion and a lot of freeze states. So whenever I get stuck in one of those, or whenever one of those comes up, I get confused and I get depressed, and I just like I don't know what to do. And I mean, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I feel like I have no clue, or I just feel like I'm doing all of this stuff and it's all in vain and it's pointless, and I can't seem to, and I know all the reasons why to do it, and I know that it's the old emotion versus the current emotion, and I'm grateful that doing these videos, doing my writing, talking to friends, doing counseling, all the things that I've been working on have helped me to distinguish the difference between the old emotion and the present emotion, and to see how well things are going in my life currently, and that some of the choices I make presently in my life have to do with stuff from the past and not from what's going on, but it's interfering with my ability to function in the present moment, which is very frustrating to me, because I'm like, I wish the stuff would just stop coming up so I could function. But at the same time, I'm grateful that it's coming up because it gives me the opportunity to process it, even though I don't like to do that. But it allows me to recognize it. It allows me to work through it. It allows me to let it go. And even though I don't enjoy the process, that is a weight that comes off of me, and I feel better. So I went to a 12-step meeting today, and I was talking about myself always turning molehills into mountains, making the little things like huge and blowing things out of proportion. And I learned how to do that growing up, and it's really easy because the little things just seem to, I struggle the most with the little things, and they feel like they're these giant mountains that I just can't climb. I just can't move. Just can't figure out. And so when I was talking at my 12-step meeting today, someone said that they turn mountains they turn molehills into mountains, but they turn mountains into molehills. And that's kind of the whole minimizing thing. And I was thinking about it later, and I was talking to my friend at dinner tonight, and even later. But I mentioned that to her, and I was like, we do this. It's like we've been trained our whole lives that with all the trauma and everything that happened, that it's kind of like what's happening to us isn't a big deal. Like we're overreacting to something, and we're not, or we're not allowed to respond to whatever it is that's happening or that's happened, and that it creates that free state because we can't fight, we can't flight, we can't respond. We're just frozen. It's like this giant mountain, this weight is just placed on us. We're stuck and we have no idea where to go or what to do with it. And it's just like, ah. And so, but I also was talking about denial. And and so to me, I was kind of picturing, and I didn't mention this to my friend, but I was picturing it after the conversation that I was having with her, that I think I have a lot of these mountains, these free states, these things that have happened that have caused a lot of confusion and frustration in my life. And I have like this giant blanket of denial, and I will put it over this giant mountain that I'm hauling. And I'm like, I don't know why I'm so tired. I don't know why I'm so stressed out. I don't know why I don't have any energy. And I'm like, duh, because I'm hauling all of this old weight, all this energy that I've built up, piled up, because I didn't know what to do with it. So it just went in the pile, and I have this giant mountain. And so then when I come across something small, something tiny, this little pebble, so to speak, or someone hands me a pebble, or life hands me a pebble, or there's some, tiny little thing that gets in my way, and I was like, all of a sudden it's a mountain because, and I'm realizing it feels like it's a mountain because I'm already carrying one, and this little pebble is just like that last straw, the last drop right on top of the whole pile, and it's like, and then I collapse because I'm barely able to carry around what I've got, and then I add something to it, and it's so tiny, but it seems so heavy, and I can't handle it, and I freak out, and I overreact to this tiny little thing. And maybe it's also because the tiny little things were the things I didn't get in trouble for getting upset over, or I just got ignored or told that I shouldn't feel that way, but I could still gripe and complain about the tiny little thing and turn it into something huge. Like my sister stealing my clothes all the time. It's not that big of a deal now, but as a teenager it was, but and it wasn't that she was stealing my clothes. That wasn't the issue. That was never the issue. That was the pebble. It was the lack of respect. It was the not asking for permission. It was the other people not listening to me. It was feeling like I was invisible, like nothing was mine, like I wasn't important enough to have things. That was the mountain. And that was the mountain I couldn't talk about. That was the mountain that was weighing me down, that was making me feel like I was inferior. And I was feeling like if I could fight for just this one little thing, to have my own clothes, to make my sister at least ask permission, or not be allowed to like take my stuff or get punished for it or something, then it would, validate me. It would make me feel like I had something in my life, that it wasn't all taken away, it wasn't all weighed down, it wasn't all these other things. So it's kind of, I ignored the mountain because I wasn't allowed to talk about it, so I focused on the molehill and made it appear like it was a mountain. So it's just kind of interesting to put that into perspective. Doesn't mean I'm going to change how I respond or react to things, because I'm pretty sure I still have a mountain covered in a blanket of denial that I'm just, refusing to deal with. Very good at that. I know that I am. And I think I occasionally just pull back the little blanket. I'm like, all right, I'm willing to deal with this rock. We're done with that rock. And eventually, if I take out enough rocks and boulders and other things like that, my mountain will shrink and it will become manageable. And by the time I actually get the whole blanket off and whatever, it will be a little pebble and it will be doable. But I can't handle it all at once. And I'm grateful I don't have to handle it all at once, because that's my other problem in life, is I feel like I have to deal with the whole thing all at once. So if I see the giant mountain that I have to hurdle, that I have to climb over or get to the top of, or figure a way around, whatever it is, it's like, and it's overwhelming and I'm feeling crushed and I can't do it. So denial blanket, cover the thing, make it go away. If I pretend it's not there, it won't hurt me. But it does, because I'm carrying it around. I have this extra weight. I'm exhausted. I don't have energy. And when I avoid the one thing that I should be doing, like writing in my journal, for example, then I end up avoiding everything else in my life, and I don't take care of other things, or I deprive myself of things like sleep that I need, um, to avoid dealing with that. And I was thinking tonight when I was driving around, like all of the other distractions that I have to come up with in my life to avoid dealing with the one problem. And it's like, why can't I just deal with the elephant in the room? Why can't I deal with the mountain? Why can't I just face that? Because if I would just face it, I wouldn't need all the other distractions. And I always feel better when I face it, when I deal with it. But I think it's because I grew up not being able to deal with it, or being told that it wasn't a mountain, it was a molehill, and I was just mistaken, and I had no reason to be reacting the way that I was. And the other thing, when I was at dinner with my friend tonight, it was a different analogy, but it kind of goes along with all of this. I was telling her that it's like everyone has that survival mode, where we're taught, different things that happen in our lives. Like you put your hand on a hot stove. It's an easy example, I think. And it burns your hand. You're like, okay, you pull your hand away, and you never want to touch the hot stove again. Well, I think the problem that we run into, or that I've run into, and it's similar with my friend, is that it's like we've been around the hot stove so much that it doesn't seem dangerous to us. Or we've been told that, I'm like, okay, it's not burning your hand if you hold it right over there and you can feel the heat, as long as you don't touch it directly, it's not burning you and you're okay. So I think God just gave me this analogy that I shared with my friend, and it seemed very apropos for myself as well. But it's the idea of a fire burning. And I was telling her, I'm like, you're getting close to this fire and you're looking at it, I'm like, oh, it looks cool. And as I was writing in my journal tonight, I realized that I'm like, I like the heat. I like things that are warm. So I'm attracted to the heat. It's like, I can get close to the fire as long as I don't touch it, I don't get burned. And so my friend was like, okay, the smoke is like there and it's blinding. And she's like, oh yeah, it's burning my eyes, coughing, can't breathe, suffocating, but I'm not getting burned, so I'm okay. So I was creating this analogy for my friend, and I'm like, okay, you're like in the room, like the living room, and the door is shut to the kitchen, like it's contained. The problem is contained, because it's in the other room. And even though there's a fire and there's flames and it's warm, if you stand by the door, it's like, oh, but it looks pretty and it's nice, and it's just, it's in the kitchen. I'm okay. I'm in the living room. It doesn't matter that there's smoke coming up in here. I'll just, turn on a fan or something. And my eyes are watering a little bit. I'm coughing, but I'm okay. I'm just going to lay on the ground and try to breathe a little bit. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm not getting burned. And so, I mean, but she was talking about that as far as like in reference to like abuse. And it's the same with like verbal abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. You get told that happens over and over again, or you get abused multiple times. You start thinking, okay, this is normal, or I survived this. It's okay. I can continue to survive. And it's like, it's like you're choking on smoke from a fire. You're not really surviving. You're barely alive. But our sense of what danger is completely distorted. And I realized for me that it really is, because, I'm like her. I'm like, I feel the fire. I'm like, it's warm. I'm like, I'm going to stay close to it. As long as I don't get too close, I won't get burned and it'll be okay. Or I can contain it or control it or something. It's not in a fireplace. It's an open fire. It's not safe. Or it's like, the circus hoops that you jump through and they light them on fire. I'm like, I jumped through. And I told her, it's like, yeah, you jumped through, you got through the hoop without getting burned. And then you landed and you broke your arm or you broke your foot. So you're still hurt. You're still injured. And you're minimizing it. You're turning the mountain into a little molehill, saying, oh, but I wasn't burned. So I'm okay. I can get up. I can keep going. And I spent a lifetime of being taught that. So when things like that happen, it's like, oh, they're little things. The abuse is little things. The beating myself up, not saying nice things to myself, or taking, verbal abuse from other people. It's okay. I've had that my entire life. Being ignored, being treated like my things don't matter, or what's important to me isn't important to anyone else, so it's not important. I've had that my entire life. So it's kind of like those survival tactics, those things that step in and say, this is wrong, this is bad, this is dangerous, those are numb. They're like, nope, nope, you've been, beeping at me my whole life and I just have ignored it. So I'm like, that doesn't mean anything to me. But I also think that I've developed the opposite, because those survival tactics, something to protect myself had to kick in because I wasn't being taken care of. My needs weren't being met. So, but I think it got distorted. It got out of alignment somehow. And I'm not entirely sure how to line it back up to make it correct. But I remember going for the weekend or just for an overnight thing to a friend's family reunion. I got invited to go, and there was like 100, 150 people there. And you would think, as like a 12, 13-year-old, that I would get totally lost in the mix with this whole other family. And instead, I was totally welcomed into the family. I was included with all the girls when they were having a little sleepover with all the bunk beds. I swear they had like this cabin and it had like, I don't know, 6 bunk beds. So there were like 12 girls in a room. And I was completely included. They were asking me questions about me and where I went to school and my life and, all of these things. My friend's dad taught me how to play rook for the first time. And when I screwed up because I didn't understand, he's like, oh, it's okay, it's okay. And he explained calmly how to fix it and what to do the next round. He even taught me how to like do the little bridge thing with the cards when you shuffle. And I had so much fun that weekend. I remember that, and I remember having fun. And then this is where the bad part kicks in. This is where the distortion comes in, because I came home and my brother got stitches because my sister threw something at him. And my biological mom just looks at me and she's like, see what happens when you're not here. And it was devastating to me because it wasn't, how was your weekend? Or I hope you had fun. Or what did you do? It was, see what happens when you're not here. And to me, that distortion kicked in where it's bad for me to have fun. It's bad for me to do other things because somebody else gets hurt. And that's my fault that somebody got hurt. And it's my job to protect other people. So it wasn't my job to protect myself. It was my job to protect my siblings. It was my job to protect the other people that I care about. And so that means it's somebody else's job to protect me. Except nobody was protecting me, myself included. So I think my survival tactics or innate survival modes, things that kick in that we're all naturally born with, got all screwed up. So it's like my job to protect other people and not myself, and that my needs don't matter because it's someone else is more important. And that I can't have fun because if I go and have fun, or if I accomplish something, if I achieve something, then somebody else gets hurt. And I don't want to hurt other people. And I think that's part of my struggle in writing my stories and sharing my stories. And I'm aware of the struggle, but it's one of those things where it's like, I'm aware of it, but I'm having a hard time with the acceptance, and I'm having a hard time of shifting things back to the natural perspective, to where it's supposed to be, and not the distorted version that I was trained to do. So it's like everything was twisted. And now I'm trying to figure out how to untwist, unknot. And I think I get through one knot of things, or one layer of things, and I'm like, okay, I've unknotted this, and I'm like, I'm free. I've got this nice big old, strand of yarn, and it's untangled, and everything's working with my emotions. And there's another knot. It's a giant knot. I got to figure out how to untwist it, to untangle it, to put it back in its proper perspective. And I don't know how many states or layers I have of things where I got frozen, where things got distorted or confused or twisted around, where it didn't make sense, or where I was devastated because something I did that I thought was fun, and I learned these great things, and I had a great time, which I should be having as a kid. I should totally be doing those things as a kid. And instead, I was given the responsibility of an adult to take care of my siblings, one of which was a year older than me, and the other was a year younger than me. And I'm like sandwiched right betwixt the two, and I'm supposed to be responsible for them. I'm not. I wasn't. I didn't understand that. I couldn't stop them from fighting all the time. I couldn't take care of that. I couldn't teach them to be different because I didn't know how, for one. And for two, I'm a year apart, age-wise. There's not enough authority for me to do anything. It wasn't my job. And this is the distortion that I have to untangle. And it was nice to go to dinner with my friend and to just kind of share. And as I'm sharing this analogy with her and figuring out stuff for her and her life and whatever, it's like, and all of this applies to me too. And I think God just works that way. It's this amazing miracle that I'm grateful that He can do that, that I can just open my mouth and speak to my friend and these words, these analogies come out, and she's like, "Oh, thank you so much. It made so much sense to me." And I was like, "You're welcome." And then I'm like, I needed to hear that too. I needed to see that in my life. I needed to see how my thought process is distorted, how my responses to things are distorted. I needed to be reminded that there's a lot of things in my subconscious, a lot of things, like my counselor said when I was in my last session, is like, I don't have to remember the trauma in order to process it. I just have to process the emotion. And I was like, great, I got a ton of this emotion. I don't know what to do with. I don't know where it came from. But I can see patterns. I can see patterns in my friend. And in seeing the patterns in my friend, I can see the patterns in myself. And I can see some of the things or reasons why everything's twisted or everything's turned around or why I respond a certain way. And it's like, okay, at least I can see it. And I could write about it in my journal. And as I wrote about it in my journal, I could see things a little bit more clearly with the, blanket of denial and things like that, and realizing like, yeah, that's me. I do that. And this is why the pebble just gets the better of me, why the little things get the better of me. This is why I'm struggling so much. But I also realized that because of all this weight that I've carried around, because of all these things that I've had put on me, that as I take them off, as I let them go, I feel lighter, which means I have more energy, I have more motivation, I have more desire to do things, which is amazing because that's what I want. It feels weird though, because I've spent my whole life hauling all of this crap around with me. But as I let it go, but it also means that I've developed some strength that I didn't realize I had, and I can use that extra strength, that extra energy to move forward, to do new things, to try new things. And it makes it easier for me to climb the next mountain, to move the next boulder, to find a way around, because I spent a lifetime working around mountains. I've just been in denial of the fact that I've been doing it. So it was kind of a realization to me that like I've had mountains my whole life and I've had to live through it or work through it. And I'm like, I just have the old emotion I just have to let go of, process and let go of, which I don't like the process. I really don't. But I like the letting go part because it feels good. It feels lighter. It feels freer. And the more that I face those things, the more that I deal with it and let it go, the less it affects my present life, the more I can enjoy my present life, the more energy that I have, the better I feel about myself, and the less I try to avoid living my life. And it is because had all that weight put on me. I had all that responsibility that wasn't mine. And I felt guilty for having fun and having a life. And I think sometimes now I start doing things and I have a life and I'm moving forward and I'm achieving my goals, and then I start freaking out because who am I hurting by doing this? And the reality is I'm probably not hurting anyone by doing it. I'm actually helping myself. I'm feeling good about myself, but that doesn't hurt somebody else to feel good about myself. It doesn't hurt someone else to take care of myself. Although in a toxic relationship or an abusive relationship, the abuser doesn't want me to help myself, because if I'm healthy or helping myself, then I'm not a doormat and they can't just use me and abuse me, and they don't like that because they have to be responsible for themselves. And so that's that's not fun for them. And of course, they want to put it on me because then they don't have to take responsibility. And I've taken on a lot of other people's responsibilities and other people's guilts. And it's interesting to find that as I go through my old stuff, I'm like, wait, that's not mine. That's not mine. It's not my responsibility. It's not my fault my brother had stitches. I wasn't even there. How could I possibly be responsible for that? I was off having fun, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So it's just a matter of putting things back into their proper perspective. But a lot of things in my life I didn't realize at the time, and I still don't always realize that they're out of perspective, that they're distorted, that I'm not seeing things clearly because that to me was normal. And so this is the process of me changing and finding a different normal, finding what actually works for me, what makes me feel good, what feels right, what doesn't have that internal conflict. Because I think the other part of that, when things get shifted and they're distorted, it causes me that freeze state. It causes me that confusion. And those memories keep randomly popping up. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this because I was happy and I was having fun. And then I'm devastated because I wasn't able to be there. And I feel guilty for what happened. And those aren't my feelings. I mean, they are my feelings, but they weren't my responsibility. I don't need to feel guilty for something that wasn't my responsibility. So it creates this confusion because there's that part of me, I think there's God showing me that I'm allowed to be happy and to have fun and that God wants me to be happy. And so I'm learning all these things, but then I'm like, but everything I was taught says the opposite, that being happy hurts somebody or bad things can happen if I go out and leave, you know, my responsibilities. It's again, it was distorted and it creates that confusion for me because it doesn't mesh. It's that internal conflict that it creates because something doesn't feel right, or I suddenly feel guilty about something that I enjoyed and then I feel bad for feeling good. It just it's confusing. And the reality is, or was, that it wasn't, I didn't need to feel bad about it. I could have just continued to be happy, but I didn't know that. I had already been trained at that point in my life that other people were my responsibility. I was never taught who, like who was, other people were my responsibility, but I never knew whose responsibility I was because if I had to take care of everyone else, someone should have been taking care of me. And I never realized that was me. I'm like, great, if it's me, I don't know how to take care of me. I don't know how to take care of anybody else. And I'm never going to get taken care of. But I'm learning it's my responsibility to take care of me and not to take care of everyone else. I mean, I can help other people when they ask for help. I can offer assistance. I can, you have kids, you take care of your kids, that sort of thing, but you teach them how to take care of themselves because they're going to grow up and need to do that on their own. It's not something you can continue to do for them. You can't do for other people what they should be able to do for themselves. So these are lessons that I've heard. These are things that are in my head that I'm like, I know, and they make sense, but it's trying to internalize all of these things and to shift everything. So I'm kind of, I guess, in a process of shifting and a process of changing. And I think every time I go through that, I feel kind of blasé, or I feel depressed and overwhelmed because it's a lot of emotion. It's a lot of shifting. It's a lot of changing and realizing that what I thought was one way is completely different. And sometimes that's hard to accept. Sometimes that's hard to just look at and see and be like, okay, this is way different than I thought it was. And sometimes it's a relief and it's good to just let all that go. And other times it creates like anger and frustration because I should have been able to live my life. And instead I was, stifled and told differently. So it's just, there's a lot of different things that go into play with all of that. And I don't have all the answers. I really don't. I just had some fun analogies talking to my friend and writing in my journal tonight, and just some realizations of more things that have been distorted, that are kind of starting to come back into to place, becoming untwisted, that were twisted. Um, but I know it's going to take some time, and that sometimes they spring back and get twisted again without my meaning to or realizing it, because it takes time to internalize all of it. It's one thing to sort it out in my head and be like, oh, I can see mentally, but at the same time, it's like, but it still feels the other way, you know? It's like, I know I should have been happy. I know it's okay to be happy. I know it's not my responsibility. It's not my fault my brother got stitches, but letting go of that guilt and that responsibility is a lot harder than just saying it. So it's that easier said than done thing. But anyway, this is what I'm dealing with, and I'm also a little frustrated with myself because I'm realizing that I continue to let people use me as a doormat, and I agree to things that are not really okay. And I kind of got um, ended up doing something tonight that I didn't really want to do. It's not a bad thing. It's not, I didn't do something horrible. It's not that. It's just doing a favor for someone that turned out to be a much bigger favor that is depriving me of some much needed sleep and some other things. And I was like, you know what? This really doesn't fit with my schedule. This really doesn't fit with what's going on for me in the morning, and what I need to do tonight as far as sleep and other things go. And so when I agreed to it, I thought my night was going to be different. I thought I was going to go to work earlier and not spend as much time at dinner with my friend, but we talked for like way longer than I thought we would. So I went to work later than I anticipated. And then I quit work earlier to do a favor for someone. And then I went to do the favor, and then it turned into something else, like an additional favor. And I'm just like, how did this become my problem? And doing all of this work, I'm like, okay, it's not my problem. And I had every right to say no and just, leave the other person kind of stranded because they didn't communicate. And had they communicated that that's what they wanted in the first place, I would have just been like, no, because that doesn't work for me. But again, I had that old default setting where I feel guilty or I want to help other people. And I feel like lots of people have been helping me right now and supporting me. So I want to be able to give back to someone else. And so I'm like, okay, I agreed to it, but it means I'm not getting any sleep. And I'm like, I'm not okay with this because I've finally been letting myself sleep for like 6 or 7 hours or more. And it's been nice. And even if I haven't slept the whole time, I've at least given myself the time, allowed myself the time to sleep in my bed. And I was like, oh, my body actually kind of likes sleeping for 7 hours in a row. This is kind of nice. So I didn't get that sleep last night, and I am not going to get any sleep tonight, maybe an hour or two, and then I'm probably going to take a really long nap, which means I will be up really late tomorrow too, which I don't really want to do. It's just throwing things off because I haven't learned how to say no. So I am at this stage again where I am aware of all the things that are going on. I am aware of the choices that I'm making that are detrimental to me, and that I need to make better choices and treat myself better. And I need to do better at saying no and setting boundaries for other people. And I am aware of where my distorted thinking or why I do this, because I got trained or told or treated like myself didn't matter and my needs didn't matter. And so trying to retrain myself is very hard to reverse those default settings. And maybe the original settings were correct, but they got messed up and multiple times growing up, to the point where it's like, oh, and now I'm trying to unbury and find those original settings and get rid of these ones that say, okay, deprive self for other people, not good. Not good. Miss out on sleep to help other people, not good. Gonna have a headache for that one. Anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. And I know it's the whole awareness thing, and that I need to accept that this is what I'm doing, And then at some point I will be ready to take some action to start changing that. And I think I always am like, I'm aware of something and I want it to change. Like, just want to wake up tomorrow and it'll be different. And I think we all feel that way sometimes, but that's not how it works. So I am learning to recognize the process. I have not learned to enjoy the process yet, but I'm at least aware of how things work, and I am grateful for that. And I am grateful that God is showing me in gentle ways and allowing me to take just one little pebble, one little stone, maybe an occasional boulder off of my mountain that's hiding under my blanket of denial. And eventually it will just be a blanket. And I'm like, what do I need that for? I'm like, maybe I'll just fold it up and tuck it away for another rainy day. But I won't need it to be as big, or I won't need it to be that um, last for as long. At least I hope not. I hope as I work through all of this that it will help me to change how I process things and allow me to face them because I feel better instead of running from them, which is my default setting for the moment. But anyway, that's kind of where I'm at for today. I don't know how helpful this was to anyone, but just know it is possible to change. It is possible to recognize um, how things have been distorted, to put things back into a proper perspective with God's help, and that He's always there, willing to lend a hand to show you a gentle way of doing it so it's not overwhelming or scary, and it becomes magically doable with God's help. And I'm grateful for that. And if you like these videos, you can hit like, subscribe, you can share with someone else if you think it will help them too. And I hope you have a great day full of gratitude and maybe some writing.